to the press about discovering the files about Roswell, and he stated publicly on the air that there was a crash and there were bodies and there were not human bodies. So he stated that. And CIA heard that and said, Chase, you can't say that. Um, so you need to do, you can't just go on the air and say that. So Chase said, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. And so he wrote a book called Crypto's Conundrum. And his interview with these was about the same time the book was ready to be published. So there's that. So did he just say that so that it gives more credence to his book, or did he say something of significance in the book? Well, if you read the book, I mean, he says some things, many things of significance, but he says that the cover-up was about hiding the fact that there were alien forces on the earth, and that there were like ancestors of Atlantis on the earth, and the government knows about this.
John Ramirez, CIA in Disclosure Team with Vinnie Adams. This one says it's a year ago. Like, he had done a bunch of interviews with a bunch of podcasts. Like in 2022, maybe the very beginning of 2023. And then he had said on one of those podcasts that, he was one of the early waves of pre-disclosure, getting the public ready for real disclosure, controlled disclosure. And so he'd done his part with this presentation, gone on all these podcasts, and now he was gonna go silent because it was time for the next wave to take over, and he wasn't gonna be back until basically after disclosure. And then, he's back, and he's talking to Vinnie, and they're just kind of like chatting in this one, even though it's an hour long. It's not one of those John Ramirez presentations. They're just talking about ufology. But I've got his presentations. We've got the Project Unity, GS-15 CIA Officer John Ramirez, navigating the U.S. intelligence community for ufologists. The Project Unity, John Ramirez presentation. So this is where he gets into it. First, he tells you about how the intelligence community is organized, how it's actually organized, the Big Five, and then all the other little ones. Who he worked for, how that worked, how their basic organization worked, how it works when they work on stuff, and then when they have to work together on stuff. Who really works on what kinds of stuff, how they interact with each other. So he spends some time on that, and it's interesting, and it's also useful in that he thinks that we should know about that as ufologists, so that we can do really good, really effective FOIA requests. It says, mainly so that you can kind of tailor your FOIA request to the exact agency. Don't just send it to the CIA. He does a couple examples, but then he gets into other, real examples, I guess. Real cases. Most of this is him showing you kind of the nuts and bolts of the parts of the CIA that he worked for, and a lot of even the inner workings. He says that his whole presentation has been sent to the CIA and all the appropriate places and asked for all the appropriate permissions, so he's allowed to talk about this in public. And it's in different, like 5 different modules. And so the first kind of part is him, introducing and explaining the organization and all the different parts and how they work together, the intelligence community. Then the second part is kind of about him. He's addressing misconceptions, which is, him, his opinion, and his personal experience and knowledge of how things work. And then he goes into looking at all these different kinds of like cases, basically. He's got expertise on radars and satellites and missiles and aircraft of all types. Kind of third part is him getting into using, the stuff he knows and the stuff that's public and the stuff that's been allowed by the CIA for him to talk about. He gives you his take on it all. That there's aliens, a couple different kinds, grays and reptilians primarily, that are involved in things with the government and were involved with the Nazis. And nowadays, whether the aliens are directly involved or kind of indirectly involved because they're the adversary, or both of those things, there's good aliens and bad aliens, right? Ally aliens and adversarial aliens, that the different space programs are aimed at either helping or combating. And it goes into all these different, patches and what they mean and what program they're attached to and what that program does. It's really fun. He says embrace widely, hold lightly. So he's a, intelligence agent, officer. He used to gather data. He gathered lots and lots of data and then make analysis of it, but he wouldn't necessarily believe it all, even though he still gathered all of it. So that was his, principle of embrace widely, hold lightly. And he says that a couple times in there. He says, oh, take that one and hold that one lightly. But he showed up on a whole bunch of different podcasts. This one is 2.5 hours with Project Unity. It was probably the most significant. Another good one in here is, Do I Got It, is going to be Lehto, the Lehto Files. And he had done some coverage of John Ramirez on Project Unity and went through all those different slides. And then eventually got in contact with John Ramirez and got him on here. And he kind of goes through it all again, just not in a slide-by-slide kind of manner. And then at the end of that Lehto show, he's kind of like passing him over to do another podcast with some other character. And it's like it's this guy. And maybe it's not this guy, but on this podcast, John Ramirez will talk to you not about his presentation, but about his UFO and alien experiences. Podcast UFO live shows. John Ramirez, CIA retired, UFOs, UAPs, encounters, and more. And he's got a few. It's a good watch. It's 2 hours long. He's got a few. This one I had to actually find again because I bookmarked it a couple times over the years, and it, has moved around on a couple occasions. But it's definitely worth a watch. It's a good watch, and he'll tell you, he's been in contact with aliens a few times since he was a kid in his career, and even recently. Been in contact with UFOs. Been in contact with orbs. One alien took him for quite a long ride at one point and told him that he's an alien. And basically all humans are to some degree. But he's more of an alien than other humans. And a lot of humans are, more alien than the others. And they know it and they can feel it and they know it their whole life. And he did too. So it's a great watch. And it's actually much older than his presentation. I think this is from 2021 when he kind of hit the streets with his ufology presentation. That was late 2022, early 2023. It was right before Grush. Never mentions Grush. Isn't really, the ufology didn't have Grush in it when he was doing this portion or later when he was hitting the streets with his CIA presentation. He's probably a really good example of, as he says he is, that he's in on it, he's part of it, him and his pals like Elizondo, and he'll name drop a lot of people. Elizondo, Greer, TTSA, Tom DeLonge, Commander Fravor, Ryan Graves, Hal Putoff. And he says, he's into ufology. He's into UFOs and sci-fi, and that's why he got into being in the CIA, and that's why a lot of people in the CIA are in the CIA or in these other intelligence agencies, is because they were into UFOs. They were into sci-fi and aliens, and they want to find out. Is a ufology presentation, a intelligence community presentation for ufology, that he went around to several podcasts and kind of gave this 5-point presentation, then answered their questions. So ufology students should definitely spend the time. You got to spend way more than just one of those 2.5 hour blocks. You probably should watch them all, but spend the time, get that John Ramirez in there. He's pre-Grudge, and so you'll see that he's in his presentation putting out a lot more nuts and bolts info than most what you would call whistleblowers nowadays have ever even attempted. So the presentation's worth it. He doesn't give you the exact same presentation on each podcast, like he says it's modular, and he answers questions. And then you got this 2 hours of his personal kind of experiences with aliens and UFOs and basically being an alien himself.